Hey guys, welcome back. This is Blue Forest. So first of all, I just wanted to mention, in case you have not seen it, the beginning of Act 3 has dropped, and that's very welcome news because it has come out only a week after the end of Act 2, which I did not necessarily expect. I thought they might take a longer break between acts, but here we are. We have the beginning of Act 3, and the rewards for it are quite good. They are improved compared to Act 2, so it's very worth diving into it when you can. And of course, more importantly, we have the Beast Wars characters back, right? So you can buy a bunch of them now. You have Wasp in the store, we have Scorp in the store, Rhinox, and Dinobot, I believe. Yes, Dino is in here, okay? You cannot buy either Cheetor or Primal because they are given as rewards for Act 3. You'll get Primal at the end of Act 3, and then you get a 4-star Cheetor with the completion of Chapter 2. So if you want to build out that full Beast Wars squad with Primal, you are going to have to wait a while, but that's okay. You can pick up some of the other Beast Wars characters if you like them, work on them. But if you are looking to build a full Beast Wars squad, with the purification and everything, conserve your resources, because we will, presumably anyway, have the entirety of Act 3 over the next 2 months or so if they're releasing a chapter every couple weeks. It should go without saying, by the way, that Beast Wars squads will be excellent for the new AM map. There's tons of DOT, shock lanes, bleed, all kinds of stuff. So if you're really into the Beast Wars characters and you want to build a team around Primal, it'll be very wise for you to save some of those resources to rank those bots up when you get them. And so otherwise, today I wanted to talk about bugs with bots. So glitches, problems, broken parts of individual bots' kits. As you probably know, lots of bots in the game have had problems going back years. Kabam never fixed most of the issues. Some bots had minor fixes, some bots had no fixes. That has continued into the new version of the game. And so what I'd like to do is just go over the most important and pressing issues that bots have. Okay, so these are issues that would either prevent you from investing certain resources into them, like a broken SIG, or issues that seriously affect the performance of a bot, right? So if a bot has a problem that affects the most important part of their kit, you're going to want to be aware of that before you decide to, rank them up and pour all kinds of resources into them, okay? Thankfully, the majority of the bots in the game do work well and work as intended, but there are a bunch that have some important problems that you should be aware of. I'm not going to go through every single bug that every bot has ever had because that would take all day. But I do want to highlight the most important glitches that are present in bots' kits. So we're going to start with Ironhide, and I am, of course, focusing on bots that are currently playable in the game now or, will be soon with Beast Wars. But thankfully, the Beast Wars bots do work very much as intended. But we're going to go ahead and start with Ironhide. He's a very good bot. Thankfully, his kit does mostly work, but he does have one issue related to the weakest part of his kit, actually, which is his purification, right? So if you use IH, you will know that he can purify one debuff at a time by blocking for 1.5 seconds, which is really more like 2 or 3 seconds if you include reaction time. I don't know why they made him purify like this. It's dumb. It's not practical. It doesn't really make any sense, especially because of the fact that most DOT, like shock, bleed, so forth, is only going to be, 3, 4, 5 seconds long anyway. And so even if you do manage to purify with Ironhide, by the time the purification actually happens, you will have eaten a lot of damage. However, it gets worse because there is a glitch with his purification. And that is the fact that if the enemy attacks you in any way while you're blocking, it will reset the timer, right? Meaning that the purification won't happen. If they make any contact with you with a range shot or they try to hit you, the timer gets reset and you can't purify. That should not happen because if the mechanism by which he purifies is simply to block, it should not matter if the enemy is attacking you, but it does. And so that makes his purification go from bad to worse. And so as a result of that, I wouldn't even really bother to think of Ironhide as a purifier at all. Occasionally you'll get lucky and be able to do it, but the fact is that most of the time, the AI, the opponent, is not going to want to just let you stand there and block for a few seconds. And that's the only way that you're going to be able to purify, especially because it is glitched. And if they attack you, you can't do it. So that is something that you do want to be mindful of if you're using Ironhide. Thankfully, the rest of his kit works very well, and he is a very strong bot. And so next up, I want to address a couple issues with Sound Blaster. He's also a very good bot, and he mostly works, but there are two things I want to mention. The first is his SIG. It does not work. I have spoken to people who have invested a lot into it. He is supposed to be able to apply a trigger rate debuff that reduces the enemy's chance to activate their own buffs, but it doesn't happen. Even if you get him up to high SIG, it just isn't working. And so if you are using SB, that's fine, but I would hold off on investing any SIGs into him because you don't want to pour a ton of SIGs into a bot like SB when it's not even going to work. I would highly recommend that you hold off and just wait for a hopeful fix to come to him soon. Okay? The other issue with Sound Blaster is not related to his kit, but it is a problem that you have when you use him, which is the fact that when you knock the opponent down, they stay down a little bit longer than normal. Their recovery time is slower than with other bots. That might not seem like a big deal, but it actually can get you into trouble because it means that you have to time your follow-up attacks differently than with any other bot, which actually would take some getting used to because if you've been playing the game for a while, it's very instinctual when you do your follow-up attacks, right? You knock the bot down, and then you have perfect timing, and you dash at them, and then you can do more damage. With SB, you can't do that. You have to delay your follow-up attacks, or you just have to wait for them to get up, because if you dash at them immediately, you can get tripped up, and they can counter you. So it's just something to be aware of if you're using SB. You have to get used to the fact that every time you knock the opponent down, any follow-up attacks you do will have to be timed a little bit differently than with any other bot. But besides that, every other part of his kit does work well except his SIG, and he is working as intended otherwise. So next up we have Dead End. He also has two issues, including his SIG. It does not work either, okay? I have friends who have gotten his SIG way up, and it is not working properly. So he's supposed to get a significant increased special crit chance when he uses a special that doesn't crit, right? So if the last hit of a special that you use doesn't crit, with his SIG, he's supposed to get a significant boost in a crit chance on the next special. Doesn't happen, okay? Even at high SIG. So just like with Sound Blaster, I would not advise you to give him any SIGs for now. Hold off on it. Allocate your SIGs to other bots. Wait for a fix. The other issue with Dead End is also something that is not related to his kit, but there is one thing you want to be aware of when you're fighting against him. Okay, so not when you're using him, but when you're fighting against him. The Dead End enemy, so when you're fighting against him, he recovers too quickly after he uses a special one. And that means that you can't follow up with a typical dash attack like you would with other bots because it's too fast. His recovery is just off. So it's basically the opposite problem that you have with Sound Blaster. In addition to that, Dead End also has too many frames after a special too. So if you're fighting Dead End, the timing to follow up with an attack or counter when he uses a special too is also a little bit off. And so that just means that when you're fighting against Dead End, the timing of your follow-up attacks when he uses a special 1 or 2 are different. They're harder to counter, and so you want to be aware of that when you're fighting against him. Besides that, though, the rest of his kit is working properly without the SIG, of course, right? So the SIG, lay off of it, leave it alone, but the rest of his kit is working as intended. And so I want to talk about Chromia. Chromia is a very good bot. I would say she's actually underrated. However, she does have one very big glaring problem that is related to one of the most important parts of her kit, and that is related to her slow, her anti-evasion. It does work properly and well against evade bots. So if you're going up against a bot like Sideswipe or B, you apply slow, and they will not be able to evade. Unfortunately, however, her slow is not working properly against evade mods. So if you go up against an evade lane in a story mission, AMs, whatever, you're not going to be able to rely on her slow because it won't trigger. And so bots will still evade. This is the exact same problem that Hot Rod used to have, and her kit is very similar to Hot Rod's. It's just unfortunate because if it did work properly, she'd be the best anti-evade bot we have in the game right now. But that's just not the case. And so that doesn't mean you can't use her because her slow is still useful against evade bots. It just means that you cannot rely on it against any kind of evade mod. In addition to that, I just wanted to mention that her slow also does not trigger on her special 2. So if you use a special 2, the bleeds will land, but for whatever reason, the slow is not activating. So you cannot rely on her slow triggering when you use her special 2. So otherwise, her kit is good and it works properly, but because of the fact that her anti-evasion is pretty central to her kit, you do want to be aware of that before you decide to rank her up or use her that much, because it's just not going to be reliable against evade mods until they fix the problem. Okay? And so I wanted to mention one issue with Rodimus. This is actually an issue that is beneficial if you're using him, but it's very annoying if you're fighting against him, and that is the fact that his armor breaks that he's applying with heavies will sometimes apply even when the heavy misses. You may have seen this, right? So it can be good for you if you're using him, right? You fire off heavies, and if the opponent dodges it, sometimes the armor break will still land. However, that's very annoying if you're fighting against him, because sometimes he will fire off a heavy, and when you dodge it, you'll still have an armor break landed on you. So it's just something to be aware of when you're fighting against him in particular. Sometimes he's going to be able to land armor breaks on you even when his heavy clearly misses you. Okay? And so I wanted to mention Ramjet. So RJ, his kit does work well and as intended, but there's one main thing I wanted to mention, which is a very slight but important issue with the special 2. If you launch a special 2 of his immediately at the end of a combo, it will often miss. You have to time it just a bit differently. So in other words, if you're using Ramjet and you want to use a special 2, at the end of the combo, you need to add a very slight delay, like half a second delay. If you do that, the special 2 will land every time. But it will miss if you do it immediately. So you just have to practice that if you are going to be using Ramjet a lot, because you don't want those specials to be missing. So like I said, it's a very slight delay, but you do want to be aware of it. And I also just wanted to mention quickly the fact that sometimes there is an issue with his medium attacks being a little bit off and not landing when they're used after he fires off range shots. Dirge actually has the same problem. It's kind of like an air punch or a whiff, but it's a little bit different, and it is hard to describe in words, but it's something that you'll see if you play with him, and so you just want to be aware of it because it can trip you up, okay? But otherwise, Ramjet does work. His kit is functioning entirely as intended. And so that brings us to Sunny. So Sunstreaker, very good bot, and thankfully his kit does work mostly properly. There is one issue, though, that I wanted to mention, and that is the fact that his melee evasion, when he's in his pristine state, does not work, okay? He's supposed to have a 10% melee evade chance, which is really a 30% melee evade chance against crits, when he's in his pristine state. It doesn't happen. I have spoken to people who have used him extensively. They have never seen him evade even once. Now, obviously, this is not a very important part of his kit. It's a low evade chance anyway, but I just wanted to make you aware of it because you cannot rely on him ever evading when he's in a pristine state. It just does not work. But the rest of his kit is working as intended. And then finally, I wanted to bring up the queen of bugs, and that is Slipstream. When Slipstream was released last year, she was an absolute utter disaster. One of the biggest screw-ups that Kabam ever put out in this game. She was just a total mess, and for the most part, she has not been fixed. Literally half her kit doesn't seem to work properly, which is too bad because she's actually an excellent bot. She has a lot of really great abilities. If she did work properly, she'd be awesome. Unfortunately, though, that's not the case. I'm not even going to go over every single issue that she has, but I do want to mention the most important ones. The first, of course, is her range shots. You will have seen this immediately if you ever use her. Many of her range shots, not all of them, but a lot of them, will seem to disappear into the air or just go right through the opponent. That's a big problem because you often rely on range shots to set up attacks, set up dashes. Of course, she relies on range shots to nullify shields, and she can get an attack buff with them. Many of them miss, and it's not predictable. You never know which ones are going to land and which ones are going to miss, which that alone makes her very unreliable, right? And very difficult to use. If you do use her, you have to really practice with her because a lot of those range shots are just going to disappear into the air or they're going to look like they go right through the opponent. It's a huge problem. I cannot believe that it was never fixed, but it wasn't. Will it ever be fixed? I have no idea, but it's a big, big problem for her. In addition to that, there are issues with her SIG. Even at high levels, she's supposed to be able to refresh debuffs on the opponent. Sometimes it seems to work, sometimes it doesn't seem to work. I know there are issues with her backstabs, particularly with her crit resistance and her power rate down. Even when they're applied, they don't seem to always work. Her backfire does seem to work, but her backstabs are not always reliable, and that's a shame because they're a very important part of her kit. I know there are problems with her power lock not working on her special too. So the point is, Slipstream is a disaster. She's a total mess. And, I would never tell people not to use bots. If you have watched my videos, you know that I don't rank bots. I feel like every bot should be usable and every bot can be good in the right hands. However, Slipstream is one of the few bots in the game I would actually encourage people not to use, at least for now, because she's just not worth it. She's a total disaster, and she's not reliable. And I most certainly would never trust her in any sort of difficult content. The hardest lanes, high-level AMs, anything like that, Slipstream will not be reliable. You will not be able to trust her because she's going to make too many mistakes. There's too many parts of her kit that are broken, and you're just liable to end up getting frustrated or even end up getting killed because so many things in her kit aren't working. So I really hope that they do fix her eventually because she has a ton of potential. But for the time being, I would advise most people to just focus on other scouts for now and only invest in Slipstream once she has at least a few of these bugs fixed. I mean, they at least need to fix the range shot issue for her to be a reliable bot to bring into any kind of difficult content of any kind. The good news is she's the only bot in the game right now that's totally screwed up, right? There are problems with other bots. She's the only one that's a total disaster, but unfortunately, for the time being, she's a mess, and I don't advise most people to use her, okay? So that's all for now, guys. I just wanted to highlight those issues. Like I said, there are a few other very minor bugs with bots, but those are the most important ones. There's a couple of broken SIGs, and there are some important issues with certain bots. It doesn't mean you can't use most of them, but just be aware of it, right? Before you start, spending tons of your resources on a bot that has a problem, just, make sure that you're aware that that problem exists, right? You don't want to, max rank and max forge Chromia because you want her anti-evasion only to find out that it doesn't work against mods, for example, okay? And so I will leave it there for now. I hope all of you are well. Do let me know if you have any questions, if you're ranking anybody up, if you're going to buy any of the Beast Wars characters, and we'll be in touch again next time. Take care.